The dust cloud rising from the westbound wagon train grew smaller until it disappeared entirely into the horizon, and Theresa Phillips stood alone on the rough wooden planks of the trading post porch, one hand gripping the worn handle of her carpetbag, while the other shielded her eyes from the brutal afternoon sun that beat down on Jordan Valley, Oregon, in the summer of 1878. She had stepped inside the trading post for just a moment to purchase a canteen of water, but when she emerged, her cousin's wagon train had vanished as if swallowed by the earth itself, leaving her stranded in this remote outpost where civilization seemed to teeter on the edge of the vast wilderness that stretched endlessly in all directions. The trading post owner, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, had merely shrugged when she asked if anyone might catch up to the wagon train. "They won't even notice you're missing until they camp tonight," he said, spitting into a brass spittoon. "By then, they'll be 20 miles gone, and no sensible person rides out into that country after dark." Theresa felt her throat tighten as she fought back tears that threatened to spill down her cheeks. She was 22 years old, traveling from Missouri to meet a man she had corresponded with for 6 months, a widower with a farm in the Willamette Valley who needed a wife. She had sold everything she owned to make this journey, and now she stood abandoned in a town that consisted of nothing more than this trading post, a shabby saloon, a blacksmith shop, and perhaps a dozen weather-beaten buildings scattered along a single dusty street. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention, and she turned to see a rider approaching from the east, his silhouette dark against the glaring sun. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. A tall man astride a chestnut horse, wearing a dusty brown hat and worn leather chaps over faded denim. He rode with the easy confidence of someone born in the saddle, his body moving in perfect rhythm with his mount. He reined in his horse at the hitching post and dismounted with fluid grace, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. When he removed his hat to wipe his brow, Theresa saw a face weathered by sun and wind but still handsome, with strong features and eyes the color of storm clouds. He appeared to be perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a shadow of stubble along his jaw. "Afternoon," he said, his voice a low rumble that carried easily in the still air. He noticed her standing there with her carpetbag, and his gray eyes narrowed slightly. "You waiting on someone?" Theresa swallowed hard, feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I was with a wagon train heading west," she said, hating how her voice wavered. "They left without me." The cowboy's expression shifted from mild curiosity to concern. He glanced down the westward road, then back at her. "How long ago?" "Perhaps an hour," she admitted. "Maybe longer. I was only inside for a moment, but when I came out they were gone." He muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse, then settled his hat back on his head. "That's rough country between here and the next settlement," he said. "You got family with that train?" "My cousin and her husband," Theresa said. "They were taking me to the Willamette Valley." The cowboy studied her for a long moment, and Theresa found herself unable to look away from his gaze. There was something in his eyes that suggested he understood what it meant to be alone in harsh country, something that spoke of his own hardships weathered and overcome. "I'm Isaac Everett," he said finally, extending his hand. "I run cattle in these parts, been tracking some strays that wandered off from my herd." She took his hand, surprised by the warmth of his calloused palm against hers. "Theresa Phillips," she said, "pleased to meet you, though I wish the circumstances were different." Isaac glanced at the sun, calculating the remaining daylight. "Listen, Miss Phillips, I can probably catch up to that wagon train if I ride hard, but it would mean traveling through the night, and my horse is already tired from a long day. There's another option, though. He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. I'm heading back to my ranch about 15 miles south of here. My sister and her husband live there with me, so it would be proper enough. You could stay there tonight, and tomorrow I could take you where you belong, catch up to the wagon train at their next camping spot. Theresa felt a wave of relief wash over her, though she knew she should be wary of accepting help from a stranger. But something in Isaac's direct gaze and forthright manner made her believe she could trust him. I wouldn't want to impose, she said hesitantly. No imposition, Isaac said. Can't leave a lady stranded in Jordan Valley. This town's got more rattlesnakes than people, and most of the people are worse than the snakes. He tied his horse to the rail and gestured toward the trading post. Let me water my horse and grab some supplies, then we'll head out. Should make it to the ranch before full dark if we leave soon. While Isaac went about his business, Theresa sat on a bench outside the trading post, watching the few people moving about the street. A woman in a faded calico dress hurried past with a basket on her arm, her eyes downcast. Two men stood outside the saloon, their conversation punctuated by harsh laughter that made Theresa's skin crawl. She thought about the letters she had exchanged with Daniel Thornton, the widower who awaited her in the Willamette Valley. His letters had been pleasant enough, describing his farm and his 2 young children who needed a mother. He had sent a photograph showing a stern-faced man with a thick beard, standing rigidly beside a fence. She had agreed to marry him not out of passion but out of practicality, knowing that an unmarried woman had few prospects and even fewer options. Isaac emerged from the trading post carrying a burlap sack of supplies which he secured to his saddle. "Ready?" he asked, offering her a hand up. "I've never ridden double before," Theresa admitted, eyeing the horse with some trepidation. "Nothing to it," Isaac assured her. "Just hold on to me and the horse will do the rest." He mounted first, then reached down to help her up. Theresa settled herself behind the saddle, perching as side saddle as she could manage while gripping her carpet bag. When the horse began to move, she instinctively wrapped her free arm around Isaac's waist, feeling the solid strength of him through his shirt. They rode south from Jordan Valley, leaving the shabby collection of buildings behind. The landscape was rugged and beautiful in its stark way, with rolling hills covered in sagebrush and scattered juniper trees. The Awahi Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks touched with gold from the descending sun. The air smelled of dust and sage, and the only sounds were the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the creak of leather. "You've come a long way from Missouri," Isaac said after they had ridden in silence for some time. "Yes," Theresa said. "It's been quite a journey." "What's waiting for you in the Willamette Valley?" he asked, though his tone suggested he might already know the answer. "A man," she said simply. "A widower with a farm. We've been corresponding." "Love match?" Isaac asked, and Theresa detected a note of something in his voice that she could not quite identify. "Practical match," she answered honestly. "My parents died of fever 2 years ago, and I've been living with my aunt and uncle in St. Louis. My uncle made it clear that I was a burden, so when Mr. Thornton's advertisement appeared in the newspaper, I answered it." Isaac was quiet for a moment. "That's a hard thing," he said finally. "Marrying a stranger. Many marriages begin that way," Theresa said, repeating the words she had told herself countless times. "Perhaps it's better not to have expectations. Then you cannot be disappointed." "Perhaps," Isaac said, but he did not sound convinced. They rode on as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Theresa found herself relaxing against Isaac's back, lulled by the steady movement of the horse and the warmth of the fading day. She noticed things about him. The way he sat so naturally in the saddle, the breadth of his shoulders, the gentle way he spoke to his horse when it stumbled slightly over a rough patch of ground. "What brought you out to Oregon?" she asked, suddenly curious about this man who had so readily offered his help to a stranger. "My father had the wandering bug," Isaac said. "We came out from Texas when I was 15, chasing the promise of better grazing land. He and my mother both died the first winter. Fever took them both within a week of each other. Left me and my sister Sarah to make a go of it. We've built up a decent herd over the years, enough to make a living anyway." "I'm sorry about your parents," Theresa said softly. "Life's hard out here," Isaac said matter-of-factly. "But it's honest work, and the land has a beauty to it if you know how to look." As twilight deepened, they crested a rise, and Theresa saw a collection of buildings nestled in a small valley below. A ranch house, a barn, several outbuildings and corrals where cattle were visible in the dimming light. Smoke rose from the chimney of the house, a welcoming sight that made Theresa realize how exhausted she was from the day's upheaval. "Home," Isaac said simply, and she heard the pride in his voice. They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the house, the front door opened and a woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps a few years younger than Isaac, with the same dark hair and strong features, though her face was rounder and her build more substantial. "Isaac," she called. "I was getting worried. You've been gone since dawn." She stopped when she saw Theresa, her eyebrows rising in surprise. Isaac dismounted and helped Theresa down, her legs unsteady after the long ride. "Sarah, this is Miss Theresa Phillips. She got left behind by her wagon train in Jordan Valley. I told her she could stay the night here, and tomorrow I'll help her catch up to her party." Sarah's expression shifted immediately from surprise to concern. "Oh, you poor thing," she said, hurrying forward to take Theresa's arm. "Come inside, you must be exhausted. Isaac Everett, you should have sent word ahead. I would have prepared the guest room properly." "Didn't have time for sending word," Isaac said mildly. "Needed to get her out of Jordan Valley before dark." Sarah led Theresa into the house, which was simple but clean and comfortable. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace, a sturdy table, and several handmade chairs. Doorways led to what Theresa assumed were bedrooms, and a ladder in the corner climbed to a loft. "My husband James is out checking the herd," Sarah said, guiding Theresa to a chair. "He'll be back soon. Let me get you some water and something to eat. You must be famished." Theresa sank into the chair gratefully, only now realizing how tense she had been holding herself. "You're very kind," she said. "I don't know what I would have done if your brother hadn't come along." "Isaac's always been one to help folks in trouble," Sarah said, pumping water into a basin and bringing it to Theresa along with a clean cloth. "Sometimes I think he's too trusting, but his heart's in the right place." Isaac came in carrying Theresa's carpet bag, which she had nearly forgotten. "I'll bed down the horse," he said. "Be back in a bit." After he left, Sarah busied herself preparing a meal, and despite Theresa's protests that she did not want to be a bother, Sarah waved her objections away. "We don't get much company out here," she said. "It's nice to have another woman to talk to. Tell me, where are you headed?" Theresa explained about the widower in the Willamette Valley, and Sarah listened with an expression that grew increasingly sympathetic. "That's a brave thing you're doing," she said when Theresa finished. "Going all that way to marry a man you've never met." "It seemed like the best option," Theresa said, though speaking the words aloud made her feel a flutter of uncertainty in her stomach. A man entered the house then, stocky and weathered, with a friendly face and sun-bleached hair. This was James, Sarah's husband, and he greeted Theresa with genuine warmth when Sarah explained the situation. Isaac returned shortly after, and they all sat down to a meal of beef stew and fresh bread. The conversation flowed easily around the table, with James and Sarah telling stories about ranch life and the challenges of raising cattle in this rugged country. Isaac spoke less than the others, but when he did contribute, Theresa found herself listening intently. He had a way of observing things, of noticing details that others might miss. When he mentioned tracking the strays earlier that day, he described the landscape they had crossed with such vivid detail that Theresa could almost see it herself. After the meal, Sarah showed Theresa to a small but comfortable bedroom with a real bed and clean linens. "It's not fancy," Sarah apologized, "but the mattress is stuffed with fresh straw and the quilts are warm." "It's wonderful," Theresa said sincerely. "Thank you so much for your hospitality." "Get some rest," Sarah said. "Tomorrow we'll come early. Isaac will want to leave at dawn to catch up to your wagon train." But sleep did not come easily to Theresa. She lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, the wind rustling through the eaves, the creak of the house settling. She thought about the wagon train moving farther away with each passing hour, about Daniel Thornton waiting for her in the Willamette Valley, about the life she had agreed to embrace. And she thought about Isaac Everett, about his quiet strength, and the way his eyes seemed to see right through to her heart. She must have eventually dozed, because she woke to the gray light of dawn filtering through the window and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. She dressed quickly and emerged to find Isaac and James already at the table, while Sarah moved efficiently around the kitchen. "Morning," Isaac said, rising politely when she entered. "Hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," Theresa said, though it was not entirely true. They ate breakfast quickly, and then Isaac went to prepare the horses. Theresa helped Sarah clear the table, grateful for something to do with her hands. "My brother's a good man," Sarah said quietly, glancing toward the door where Isaac had disappeared. "One of the best I know." "I can see that," Theresa said. "He doesn't talk much about feelings," Sarah continued, "but I can tell when something's weighing on him. This morning, he's been quieter than usual." Theresa did not know what to say to that, so she simply nodded and continued drying the dishes Sarah handed her. When Isaac was ready, Theresa thanked Sarah and James profusely for their kindness. Sarah embraced her warmly. "Safe travels," she said. "I hope you find happiness in the Willamette Valley." This time, Isaac had saddled a gentler mare for Theresa to ride, explaining that they would make better time with two horses. He adjusted the stirrups for her shorter legs and showed her how to hold the reins properly. "She's steady," he assured her. "Just stay relaxed and she'll follow my horse." They set out as the sun was climbing above the eastern horizon, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. Isaac led them northwest, explaining that the wagon train would likely have camped near a creek he knew, about 25 miles from where they had left Theresa behind. The morning was cool and pleasant, and Theresa found herself enjoying the ride despite the soreness in her legs from the previous day. Isaac pointed out various features of the landscape, the mountain peaks in the distance, the signs of wildlife in the scrub brush, the way the clouds gathered over certain hills in the afternoon. "You know this country well," Theresa observed. "Been riding it for 10 years now," Isaac said. "Gets in your blood after a while. Some folks can't stand the emptiness, but I find it peaceful." "It is beautiful," Theresa agreed, looking at the vast expanse of land rolling away in all directions. "So much space, so much sky." They rode in companionable silence for a time, and Theresa found her thoughts drifting. She imagined what her life would be like in the Willamette Valley, cooking and cleaning in a farmhouse, raising Daniel Thornton's children as her own. It was a respectable life, a secure life. But the image felt curiously flat, as if she were looking at a faded photograph rather than a vibrant future. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat the food Sarah had packed for them. They found shade under a cluster of juniper trees, and Isaac unsaddled the horses so they could graze on the sparse grass. "Tell me about your ranch," Theresa said as they sat on a fallen log, sharing bread and cold beef. Isaac's face lit up in a way she had not seen before. "It's not much compared to the big spreads in Texas," he said, "but we've built it up from nothing. We run about 300 head of cattle now, sell them in the fall to buyers who drive them to the railroad. It's hard work, especially in winter, but there's something satisfying about it." "Building something that's yours, you know." "I do know," Theresa said softly. "Or at least I wish I did. I've never had anything that was truly mine." Isaac looked at her intently. "What about after you marry? Won't the farm be partly yours?" Theresa shook her head. "A wife's property belongs to her husband. I'll have a home and security, which is more than many women can say, but it won't truly be mine." "That doesn't seem right," Isaac said with a frown. "It's the way of things," Theresa said with a shrug, though inside she felt a pang of sadness. They continued riding after their brief rest, and as the afternoon wore on, Isaac began to scan the horizon more intently. Finally, as they crested a rise, he pointed ahead. "There," he said. "See that line of trees? That's the creek. If they camped where I think they did, we should find them just beyond." Theresa's heart began to beat faster, though whether from relief or apprehension she could not say. They urged the horses forward, and soon Theresa could see the white canvas tops of wagons through the trees. But as they drew closer, Isaac suddenly reined in his horse, his body going tense. Theresa stopped beside him, following his gaze to the wagon camp. Something was wrong. She could see it in the way the wagons were positioned, circled tightly, and in the clusters of people standing in agitated groups. "Stay close to me," Isaac said, his voice low and serious. They rode into the camp, and immediately people turned to stare. Theresa recognized some of the faces from her journey, but the woman she sought was nowhere visible. Then her cousin Martha appeared from behind a wagon, her face pale and tear-stained. "Theresa," Martha cried, rushing forward. "Oh, thank God! We thought something terrible had happened to you." Theresa dismounted awkwardly, her legs stiff from riding. "I was left behind in Jordan Valley," she said. "This is Mr. Everett. He kindly offered to help me catch up to you." But Martha was not listening. She gripped Theresa's arms tightly, her eyes wild with distress. "There's been an accident," she said, her voice breaking. "It's George. A wagon wheel broke when we were crossing a rocky stretch yesterday evening, and he was trying to fix it when the whole thing shifted. It crushed his leg." Theresa felt the blood drain from her face. George was Martha's husband, a good man who had agreed to take Theresa west with them. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad," Martha said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We've bandaged it as best we can, but it's badly broken, maybe worse. He needs a doctor, but we're days away from any town with one. The wagon master says we need to keep moving, but I can't leave George, and he can't travel like this." Isaac had dismounted and stood beside Theresa, his expression grave. "Let me see him," he said. Martha led them to a wagon where George lay on a makeshift bed, his face gray with pain. His leg was wrapped in bloody bandages, and even from a distance, Theresa could see the unnatural angle of it. Isaac knelt beside the injured man, his hands gentle as he examined the leg without removing the bandages. "I'm no doctor," Isaac said quietly, "but I've set broken bones before for both animals and men. This needs proper medical attention and soon, or he could lose the leg. Maybe worse." "The nearest doctor is in Boise," Martha said desperately. That's 4 or 5 days from here by wagon. Isaac stood and moved away from the wagon, gesturing for Theresa and Martha to follow. When they were out of George's earshot, he spoke in a low voice. My ranch is less than a day's ride from here. We could get him there, and then I could ride hard for the doctor in Jordan Valley. Old Doc Peterson isn't much, but he's better than nothing. It would be faster than trying to get all the way to Boise. Martha looked torn. But the wagon train is leaving. The wagon master says we're behind schedule as it is, and they won't wait. Then stay behind, Isaac said simply. Get your husband help, and when he's recovered enough to travel, I'll help you catch up to the train or find another way west. I can't ask you to do that, Martha protested. We're strangers to you. You're not asking, Isaac said. I'm offering. It's what neighbors do. The wagon master, a gruff man named Campbell, was not pleased with the plan, but he agreed that George could not travel with the train in his condition. We'll keep moving, he said. Can't afford to wait. If you folks want to stay behind, that's your choice. Theresa felt a strange mixture of emotions as she watched the preparations unfold. Part of her knew she should continue with the wagon train, that Daniel Thornton was waiting for her in the Willamette Valley. But Martha was her cousin, her only remaining blood relative, and she could not abandon her in this crisis. She sought out Isaac, who was helping to prepare a travois that could be dragged behind a horse to transport George. I need to stay with my cousin, she said. She'll need help nursing George. Isaac looked at her for a long moment and something flickered in his gray eyes. What about the man waiting for you? I'll write to him, Theresa said, though the words felt heavy on her tongue. Explain what happened. Perhaps I can catch another wagon train later or find another way west. Perhaps, Isaac said softly, and she thought she detected a note of something like hope in his voice. The next hours were a blur of activity. They fashioned the travois and carefully moved George onto it, the injured man biting down on a leather strap to keep from crying out. Martha packed their essential belongings into bundles that could be carried on horseback, and the wagon master distributed their remaining supplies among the other wagons. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, the wagon train prepared to move out. Theresa embraced the few women she had befriended during the journey, promising to write when she could. Then she stood with Martha and Isaac, watching as the wagons rolled away, the white canvas tops glowing golden in the late afternoon light. When the last wagon had disappeared over a rise, Theresa felt an odd sense of liberation, as if she had been released from a path she had never truly wanted to follow. She glanced at Isaac, who was checking the ropes securing George to the travois, his movements efficient and sure. Ready? He asked, looking up at her. Ready, she said, and meant it. The journey back to the ranch was slow and difficult, with frequent stops to check on George and adjust the travois. Martha rode on one of the horses from her wagon team, leading the other horse that pulled the travois, while Isaac and Theresa rode ahead to scout the smoothest path. Night fell before they were halfway there, and Isaac made the decision to camp rather than risk injuring George further by traveling in darkness. They built a small fire and did what they could to make George comfortable. Martha sat beside her husband, holding his hand and speaking to him in low, soothing tones. Isaac and Theresa worked together to prepare a simple meal and care for the horses, moving with the easy coordination of people who understood each other without needing many words. After they had eaten and Martha had dozed off beside her husband, Theresa and Isaac sat by the dying fire, both wrapped in blankets against the chill of the night air. Thank you, Theresa said quietly, for all of this. You didn't have to help us. Yes, I did, Isaac said simply. Couldn't do otherwise and still live with myself. Not many men would see it that way, Theresa observed. Isaac poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a small shower of sparks. My father used to say that character is what you do when no one's watching, when there's no reward for doing the right thing. Out here, we depend on each other. Today, it's your cousin's husband who needs help. Tomorrow, it might be me thrown from a horse with a broken leg, hoping someone will come along. You're a good man, Isaac Everett, Theresa said, and she saw his face flush slightly in the firelight. Just trying to do right, he said gruffly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds. The horses moving softly in their picket line, the distant yip of coyotes, the whisper of wind through the sagebrush. "Can I ask you something?" Isaac said eventually. "Of course." "This man you were going to marry, this Daniel Thornton. Do you love him?" The question hung in the air between them. Theresa considered lying, giving the expected answer, but something about the darkness and the intimacy of the moment made her want to be honest. "No," she said softly. "I don't love him. I've never even met him. It was a practical arrangement, nothing more." "Do you think you could have learned to love him?" Isaac asked. Theresa thought about that, really thought about it. "I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe. Or maybe I would have just learned to accept my situation, to find contentment in duty and routine. Many marriages are built on less." "You deserve more than that," Isaac said, his voice low and intense. "You deserve to be more than just accepted or tolerated. You deserve to be cherished." Theresa's breath caught in her throat. She turned to look at Isaac and found him watching her with an expression that made her heart race. "Isaac," she began, but did not know how to finish the sentence. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle as they intertwined with hers. "I know I've only known you for 2 days," he said. "I know it's not my place to say this, but I can't stop thinking about you heading off to marry a stranger when you could be—" He stopped, seeming to search for words. "Could be what?" Theresa whispered. "Could be with someone who's already falling in love with you," Isaac said, and the words hung between them like something precious and fragile. Theresa felt tears spring to her eyes. "Oh, Isaac," she said, "I've been trying so hard not to feel what I'm feeling. I told myself it was just gratitude or the strangeness of the situation, but it's more than that, isn't it?" "I think so," Isaac said. "At least, it is for me." They sat there, hands clasped, looking at each other in the dying firelight. Then Isaac leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Theresa did not pull away. She met him halfway, and when his lips touched hers, gentle and questioning, she felt something in her chest crack open, releasing a flood of emotion she had been holding back. The kiss was brief, barely more than a brush of lips, but it felt like a promise of something real and true. When they drew apart, both were breathing fast. "I have nothing to offer you," Isaac said. "Just a ranch and a hard life and a man who doesn't always know the right words to say." "That's everything," Theresa said. "That's more than I ever hoped for." They kissed again, longer this time, and Theresa felt as if she were waking from a long sleep. This was what she had been missing in all of Daniel Thornton's letters. This spark, this connection, this feeling of rightness that settled over her like a warm blanket. Eventually they drew apart, both knowing they should rest before the long day ahead. But as Theresa lay in her bedroll, staring up at the vast expanse of stars overhead, sleep was the last thing on her mind. Everything had changed. Her carefully laid plans had been upended, and instead of feeling frightened or uncertain, she felt more alive than she had in years. They reached the ranch late the following afternoon, and Sarah and James rushed out to help bring George inside. They laid him on a bed in the spare room, and while Martha tended to her husband, Isaac saddled a fresh horse. "Jordan Valley is 5 hours hard riding," he said. I'll be back with the doctor by midnight if I can manage it. Be careful, Theresa said, and the look that passed between them was full of unspoken feeling. Isaac nodded and mounted up, spurring the horse into a gallop. Theresa watched until he disappeared from view, then turned to help Sarah in the kitchen. Sarah was curious about what had happened, and as Theresa explained the situation with George's injury and the wagon train moving on, she saw Sarah's sharp eyes assessing her. "And what about your plans?" Sarah asked. "The man in the Willamette Valley." Theresa felt her cheeks warm. "I'll need to write to him," she said. "Explain that circumstances have changed." "Circumstances," Sarah repeated with a knowing smile. "Is that what we're calling my brother now?" Theresa could not help but smile in return. "Sarah, I know it seems sudden and perhaps foolish, but—" "Foolish," Sarah interrupted. "I've been watching Isaac mope around here for the last 5 years, ever since Susan Martin married that banker from Boise. He's been going through the motions, working himself into exhaustion so he doesn't have to think about being alone. Then he rides in here with you, and I see something in his eyes I haven't seen in years. That's not foolish. That's a miracle." "We barely know each other," Theresa said, needing to voice the practical objection even though her heart had already made its decision. "You'll have a lifetime to get to know each other," Sarah said wisely. "What matters is whether you feel something real. Do you?" "Yes," Theresa said without hesitation. "I do." The hours until Isaac returned seemed to crawl by. Theresa helped Sarah prepare food and sat with Martha, who held vigil beside George's bed. The injured man's condition seemed stable but serious, his fever rising as his body fought against the trauma. It was past midnight when they heard hoofbeats, and Theresa rushed to the door to see Isaac riding in with an older man seated behind him. Doc Peterson was thin and weathered with gnarled hands and rheumy eyes, but he moved with purpose as he dismounted and grabbed his medical bag. "Where's the patient?" he asked, and Sarah led him to the spare room. Isaac caught Theresa's eye as he passed, squeezing her hand briefly. "How's he been?" he asked quietly. "Feverish," Theresa said, "but Martha's kept water on him and changed the bandages." Isaac nodded wearily and went to tend to the horses while the doctor examined George. Theresa followed Isaac to the barn, watching as he unsaddled the exhausted animal and rubbed it down with practiced efficiency. "You must be exhausted," she said. "I'm all right," Isaac said, though she could see the fatigue in every line of his body. "Just worried about your cousin's husband." "It's going to be touch and go." Theresa moved closer, putting her hand on his arm. "You've done everything you could, more than anyone could ask." Isaac set down the brush and turned to face her fully. In the dim light of the barn, with hay dust floating in the air and the warm smell of horses surrounding them, he pulled her into his arms. Theresa went willingly, resting her head against his chest and listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. "I love you," Isaac said quietly. "I know it's too soon to say it, and maybe I'm a fool, but I can't hold it in any longer. I love you, Theresa Phillips." Theresa tilted her head back to look up at him. "I love you too," she said. "I think I started falling for you the moment you offered to help a stranded woman you didn't know." They kissed there in the barn, a deep, passionate kiss that seemed to seal a promise between them. When they finally drew apart, both were breathless. "Marry me," Isaac said. "Not because it's practical or convenient, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Stay here, build a life with me. I know it will be hard sometimes, but I swear I'll spend every day trying to make you happy." Theresa felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." They stood there holding each other until Sarah's voice called from the house, summoning them inside. Doc Peterson had set George's leg and dosed him with laudanum for the pain. "He'll live," the old doctor pronounced, but that leg's going to take months to heal proper. He can't be jostling around in a wagon for quite some time." Martha looked stricken. "But we were supposed to meet George's brother in the Willamette Valley. He's expecting us to help run his farm." "Write to him," Isaac said. "Tell him what happened. In the meantime, you and George can stay here. We've got the room, and when he's healed up enough, we'll figure out the next steps." "I can't ask you to do that," Martha protested, though her voice was weak with relief and exhaustion. "You're not asking," Isaac said, echoing what he had said before. "Family helps family, and Theresa's family is my family now." Sarah's eyes widened, and she looked from Isaac to Theresa and back again. Then a huge smile broke across her face. "Oh," she exclaimed. "Oh, this is wonderful." Theresa felt herself blushing as she explained to Martha and the doctor that she and Isaac were going to be married. Martha, despite her exhaustion and worry, managed to smile and embrace her cousin. "I'm so happy for you," she said. "George and I hoped you might find love, not just security. This is even better than we could have wished." Doc Peterson agreed to stay the night to monitor George, and Sarah insisted on preparing a late meal for everyone despite the hour. They sat around the table, tired but united in their relief that the crisis had been weathered. Isaac sat beside Theresa, his hand finding hers under the table, their fingers intertwined. Over the next weeks, life at the ranch settled into a new rhythm. George slowly recovered, though it became clear that Doc Peterson had been right about the long healing time. Martha proved to be a hard worker, insisting on helping with the household chores to earn their keep despite Sarah's protests. Theresa threw herself into learning everything about ranch life, determined to be a true partner to Isaac. She learned to cook over the wood stove, to preserve vegetables and meat, to sew and mend the endless stream of torn clothing that came from ranch work. She learned to ride better, to help with the gentler livestock chores, to manage the household accounts. And through it all, her love for Isaac deepened and grew. They were married on a brilliant October morning, with a traveling preacher who made circuit rounds through the remote ranches performing the ceremony. Theresa wore a dress that Sarah had carefully altered from her own wedding gown, and Isaac wore his best shirt and a string tie. Martha and George, who was hobbling around on crutches by then, stood as witnesses along with Sarah and James. The ceremony was simple but profound. When Isaac slipped a gold band onto Theresa's finger, a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, she felt the weight of the commitment they were making. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Isaac kissed her tenderly, Theresa knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The wedding breakfast was a joyous affair, with food Sarah had been preparing for days. Neighbors from surrounding ranches had been invited, and the house was full of laughter and music and goodwill. Theresa met people who would become her friends and community, people who welcomed her with genuine warmth. That night, in the bedroom that was now truly theirs, Isaac held Theresa close. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Theresa answered honestly. "When I was standing on that trading post porch, feeling so lost and alone, I never dreamed that being left behind would lead me to this. Best thing that ever happened to me, finding you there," Isaac said, kissing her forehead. "Changed my whole life." They made love that night with tenderness and passion, discovering each other with wonder and joy. Afterward, as Theresa lay in Isaac's arms, listening to his steady breathing as he drifted toward sleep, she thought about the letter she had written to Daniel Thornton, explaining that she would not be coming to the Willamette Valley after all. She had been apologetic but firm, wishing him well in his search for a wife. She had included money to repay him for the expenses he had incurred on her behalf, money that Isaac had insisted on providing. "A man should pay his own way," Isaac had said when she protested. "And that includes any debts my wife might have from before we married." My wife. The word still sent a thrill through her. As autumn gave way to winter, the ranch prepared for the harsh months ahead. Cattle were brought down from the high pastures, hay was stacked in the barn, supplies were laid in for the long season of cold and snow. George's leg continued to heal, and he began to talk about the future with Martha. "We've written to my brother," George told Theresa and Isaac one evening as they sat around the fire. "Explained what happened. He's found someone else to help him with his farm, and he suggested we think about settling here instead. He could stake us to some cattle, help us get started with our own place. There's good land east of here," Isaac said thoughtfully. "Man named Jenkins used to have a place there, but he moved south last year. The land's available for homesteading if you want to file a claim." "Would you really not mind having us as neighbors?" Martha asked Theresa. "Mind," Theresa exclaimed. "I'd love it. We could visit regularly, help each other. The children could grow up together." She stopped, realizing what she had said, and felt her cheeks warm. But Isaac squeezed her hand and smiled. "I hope they will," he said softly. Winter passed with its share of hardships. Bitter cold, heavy snows, cattle lost to freezing temperatures. But inside the ranch house, there was warmth and love and laughter. Sarah and James welcomed a son in February, a healthy baby they named Daniel. Theresa helped Sarah through the birth and the exhausting early weeks, learning what it meant to care for an infant. Spring came late but glorious, the hills erupting in wildflowers and new grass. George filed his homestead claim and began the work of building a cabin on his land, with Isaac and James helping whenever they could spare the time. Martha and Theresa worked side by side, planning gardens and sewing curtains and all the 1,000 tasks involved in making a house a home. It was in early summer that Theresa confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was carrying Isaac's child. She told him one evening as they rode out to check on the cattle, the two of them alone on the vast, golden grassland. Isaac's face transformed with joy. He dismounted and helped her down from her horse, then spun her around in a circle, laughing. "A baby," he kept saying. "We're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Theresa asked, though she could see the answer written plainly on his face. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," Isaac said, kissing her soundly. "You've given me everything, Theresa. Everything I ever wanted and more than I knew how to dream." Their son was born the following February, on a day when the snow fell soft and silent outside the windows. The birth was long and difficult, but Sarah was there to help, and Doc Peterson had made the journey out to the ranch to attend. When Theresa finally held her baby in her arms, looking down at his tiny, perfect face, she felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "What should we name him?" Isaac asked, his finger gentle as he stroked the baby's downy head. Theresa thought about it, about all the people who had helped them reach this moment. "What about Isaiah?" she suggested. "Isaiah Thomas Everett." Isaac's eyes grew bright with emotion. "That's perfect," he said. "Perfect." The years rolled on, each one building on the last. Martha and George thrived on their homestead, eventually welcoming 3 children of their own. The two families remained close, their children growing up together, running wild across the rangeland in the summer and gathering around fires for stories in the winter. Theresa and Isaac added to their family as well. A daughter they named Tabitha rose 2 years after Isaiah, and another son, Isaac Jr., 3 years after that. The ranch prospered, the herd growing larger and stronger. They added onto the house, building more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. They weathered droughts and hard winters, celebrated good years and helped each other through lean ones. Sarah and James eventually built their own place on a piece of land adjacent to the main ranch, wanting their growing family to have their own space while staying close. The three families formed a community of their own, supporting each other through all the joys and sorrows that life brought. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Theresa back to Jordan Valley. The town had grown some, with a new hotel and a proper general store replacing the old trading post. They stood together on the wooden sidewalk, looking at the place where their story had begun. You ever wonder what your life would have been like if the wagon train hadn't left you behind? Isaac asked. Theresa thought about it honestly. Sometimes, she admitted, but I can't imagine it would have been nearly as happy. I would have had security and respectability, but not love, not real love. Isaac pulled her close. I thank God every day that you were left behind, he said. Selfish as that might sound. Not selfish, Theresa said. True. We were meant to find each other, Isaac. I believe that with all my heart. They walked through the town hand in hand, then mounted their horses for the ride back to the ranch. As they crested the rise that looked down into their valley, Theresa felt the same sense of homecoming she experienced every time she returned from a journey. Below them, smoke rose from the chimneys of their home, and she could see their children playing in the yard under Sarah's watchful eye. There it is, Isaac said softly. Home. Home, Theresa echoed, and the word held all the love and belonging she had ever sought. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and growth. Isaiah grew into a tall, serious boy who loved the cattle and the land as much as his father did. Tabitha was bright and spirited, with her mother's determination and her father's kind heart. Little Isaac, whom everyone called Junior, was the family clown, always finding ways to make everyone laugh. When Theresa was 40 years old and Isaac 43, they welcomed one more surprise child, a daughter they named Sarah Grace, after Isaac's sister, who had been such a pillar of support from the very beginning. Aunt Sarah proclaimed herself delighted to have a namesake and spoiled the little girl shamelessly. Martha and George's children and Theresa and Isaac's children grew up more like siblings than cousins, always underfoot at one house or the other. Summer evenings would find both families gathered together for meals that stretched long into the twilight, the adults talking while the children played, and the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. One such evening, when they had been married for 15 years, Theresa and Isaac took a walk together after the meal, leaving the children with Sarah and Martha. They walked to the top of the hill behind the house, where they could see for miles in every direction. I was thinking today, Isaac said, about that cowboy who found you at the trading post all those years ago. That lucky fool who got to say, "I'll take you where you belong," and mean it. Theresa laughed. You were that cowboy. I know, Isaac said with a grin. Like I said, lucky fool. But I was thinking about how I told you I'd take you where you belonged, meaning back to your wagon train. Turned out where you belonged was right here with me all along. I knew it almost from the start, Theresa confessed. When we were riding back to your ranch that first time, I kept thinking how right it felt to be with you, how easy it was to talk to you. I tried to tell myself I was being foolish, that I barely knew you, but my heart already knew the truth. Isaac wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Best decision I ever made, he said, offering to help a stranded woman at a trading post. Best thing that ever happened to me, Theresa said, missing that wagon train. They stood in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the first stars began to appear. From the house below, they could hear the faint sounds of children's laughter and adult conversation, the comfortable noise of family. You have any regrets? Isaac asked. Theresa turned in his arms to face him. Not a single one, she said firmly. You gave me everything I didn't know I was looking for. Love, family, a home, a purpose. You showed me what it means to be truly cherished, not just accepted or tolerated. Every day with you has been a gift. Isaac kissed her tenderly. I love you more today than the day we married, he said. Didn't think that was possible, but it's true. Every year, every day, you become more precious to me. And you to me, Theresa said, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. You're my home, Isaac Everett. My heart's home. As they walked back down the hill hand in hand, Theresa thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had been so frightened that day in Jordan Valley, standing alone with her carpet bag, watching her last connection to her old life disappear over the horizon. She had felt abandoned and lost, with no idea what would become of her. But that moment of abandonment had been the doorway to everything she had ever truly wanted. Being left behind had actually been a blessing in disguise, because it had put her exactly where she needed to be when Isaac Everett rode into town. The ranch continued to prosper over the years. Isaiah eventually took over more and more of the daily operations, showing the same dedication and love for the land that his father possessed. Tabitha married a teacher who came west to start a school, and they built a house in Jordan Valley, which by then had grown into a proper town with a church and a school and even a small newspaper. Junior, true to his nature, became a horse trader, traveling throughout Oregon and into California, always returning home with stories of his adventures and pockets full of profit from his deals. Little Sarah grew into a beautiful young woman who loved music and eventually married a merchant's son, settling in Boise but visiting the ranch often. Through it all, Theresa and Isaac remained the center of their family, the anchor that held everything together. They aged gracefully, their hair turning silver, their faces marked by years of sun and wind and laughter. But their love for each other never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, tempered and strengthened by all they had weathered together. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house rang with voices and laughter, 3 generations coming together to honor the couple whose love had made all of this possible. After the meal, Isaiah stood to make a toast. To my parents, he said, his voice thick with emotion, who taught us all what it means to love truly and live well. Pa, you always said that finding Ma standing alone at that trading post was the best luck you ever had. But I think it was more than luck. I think it was meant to be. You two were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together, meant to show the rest of us what a real partnership looks like. So here's to 30 more years and to the love that makes everything possible. Hear, hear, the assembled family chorused, raising their glasses. Theresa looked around at all the faces she loved, at the life she and Isaac had built together, and felt her heart swell with gratitude. This was what belonging meant, not just having a place to live, but being surrounded by people who loved you, who needed you, who were made better by your presence in their lives. That night, after everyone had gone home or retired to various bedrooms, Theresa and Isaac lay in bed together, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch at night. 30 years, Isaac marveled. Seems like both forever and no time at all. I know what you mean, Theresa said. Sometimes I can still remember exactly how I felt that first day, standing on that porch feeling so lost. And then I look at everything we've built, everyone we've raised, and it seems impossible that it all came from that one moment. That one moment when I decided to help a pretty lady who needed a hand, Isaac said. When you said you'd take me where I belonged, Theresa added. And I did, Isaac said with satisfaction. Took you right home, even though neither of us knew it at the time. They fell asleep holding hands, the way they had nearly every night for 30 years, and in the morning they woke to another day of the life they had built together. More years passed, bringing both joy and sorrow, as is the way of life. They lost Sarah's husband James to a heart attack when he was 68, and Sarah came to live with them permanently after that. Martha's George passed away peacefully in his sleep at 72, having lived a full and happy life. Doc Peterson died, and a younger doctor took over his practice. The old trading post in Jordan Valley was eventually torn down and replaced with a proper mercantile. Through it all, Theresa and Isaac remained constant, their love a testament to what had begun that day when circumstance and fate had brought them together. They celebrated the births of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, presided over family gatherings, and dispensed wisdom earned through a lifetime of living and loving well. When Isaac was 70 years old, he took ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For weeks, he lay in bed while Theresa nursed him with fierce determination, refusing to accept that she might lose him. Their children took turns sitting with them, and the house was never empty of family. But Isaac's strong constitution and Theresa's devoted care pulled him through, and by spring he was back on his feet, though moving more slowly than before. "Can't get rid of me that easy," he joked to Theresa. "Still got years left with you." "You better," Theresa said, only half joking. "I'm not done with you yet." Isaac Everett. They made it to their 40th anniversary, then their 45th. By then, they had a dozen grandchildren and several great-grandchildren, a sprawling family tree that had all begun with a chance meeting at a remote trading post. On a warm summer evening when Theresa was 67 and Isaac 70, they took their customary walk up the hill behind the house. They moved more slowly now, but they still made the climb together, holding hands and pausing occasionally to catch their breath. From their vantage point, they could see the ranch spread out below them, so much larger and more prosperous than it had been when Theresa first saw it. They could see Isaiah's house, built a few hundred yards from the main house, and the homes of two of their other children who had chosen to stay on the land. They could see the extensive corrals and barns, the fields and pastures, all the visible proof of decades of hard work and love. "We did good," Isaac said quietly. "Built something that will last." "We did," Theresa agreed. "But the best thing we built was our family, our love. That will last longer than any building or fence line." Isaac turned to face her, his weathered hands cupping her face gently. "I want you to know," he said seriously, "that every single day with you has been a blessing. If I could go back and live my life again, I wouldn't change a single moment. Well, except maybe I'd find you at that trading post even sooner." Theresa laughed through the tears that had sprung to her eyes. "I love you," she said. "I've loved you for 45 years, and I'll love you for however many we have left, and then I'll love you beyond that." "Beyond that," Isaac echoed, and kissed her with all the tenderness and passion of a man who had never stopped courting his wife, never stopped seeing her as the beautiful young woman who had captured his heart at first sight. They made it back to the house as the stars were coming out, and that night they fell asleep in each other's arms as they had thousands of times before. Isaac lived to be 78 years old, passing away peacefully in his sleep with Theresa beside him. The funeral drew people from 3 counties, all the lives he had touched over his years. He was buried on the hill where he and Theresa had taken so many evening walks with a simple stone that read, "Isaac Thomas Everett, beloved husband, father, and friend." He knew where he belonged. Theresa lived another 8 years after Isaac passed, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling stories about their grandfather and the love story that had begun at a dusty trading post so many decades ago. She never remarried, never considered it. Isaac had been her one true love, the man who had seen her heart and claimed it completely on her deathbed at age 75, with all her children gathered around her. Theresa's last words were clear and certain. "I'm going home now. Isaac's waiting to take me where I belong." She was buried beside Isaac on the hill, her stone reading. Theresa Everett, beloved wife, mother, and friend, she found where she belonged. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, but it remained known as the Everett Place, a testament to the couple who had built it together. And on summer evenings, when the sun painted the sky in gold and purple, the descendants of Isaac and Theresa still walked up that hill, still stood looking out over the land, still told the story of the woman who was left behind at the trading post and the cowboy who took her where she belonged. It was a story of chance and choice, of fate and faith, of a moment when two people found each other exactly when they needed to most. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that sometimes the detours in life, the moments that seem like disasters or abandonments, are actually blessings in disguise, doorways to futures we never could have imagined but were always meant to find. And it was, above all, a love story. The kind of love that transforms ordinary lives into something extraordinary, that builds legacies not just of land and cattle, but of family and devotion, and the kind of partnership that makes two people stronger together than either could ever be alone. The story of Isaac and Theresa became legend in their part of Oregon, told and retold until it took on the quality of myth. But for those who had known them, who had seen the way they looked at each other even after decades of marriage, who had witnessed the quiet devotion and fierce loyalty they showed each other through good times and bad, the story was simply the truth of two lives perfectly joined, two hearts that had recognized each other instantly and never looked back. Years became decades, and decades became a century, but the legacy of that day at the trading post lived on. The original homestead became a historic site, preserved by the family and eventually opened to visitors who wanted to see where one of Oregon's great love stories had taken root and flourished. The hill where Isaac and Theresa were buried became a place where people came to propose marriage, to renew their vows, to remember that true love was possible and worth fighting for. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the grass and the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, some people swore they could see two figures walking hand in hand up that hill, could hear the faint sound of laughter and quiet conversation, as if Isaac and Theresa were still taking their evening walk, still finding joy in each other's company, still right where they belonged, together forever. Their great-great-grandchildren eventually compiled all the letters, journals, and stories into a book that was published, and became a beloved account of life in the early West. The book detailed not just the dramatic moment of their meeting but the daily reality of their lives together, the small kindnesses and grand gestures, the challenges overcome, and the joys celebrated. One entry in Theresa's journal, written on their 25th anniversary, summed up the essence of their love. "Today marks 25 years since Isaac asked me to marry him in that barn, when we had known each other for barely 3 days. Everyone thought we were mad, rushing into marriage so quickly. But we knew something they didn't. When you recognize your home, you don't hesitate to walk through the door. Isaac has been my home from the moment he offered to help a stranded woman at a trading post. He said he would take me where I belonged, and he did. I belonged with him, beside him, building a life together. I have never regretted a single moment. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." This is what love is supposed to be, a partnership of equals, a friendship that deepens with time, a passion that never quite fades. We are blessed beyond measure, And I thank God every day for the wagon train that left me behind, for the cowboy who found me, for every twist of fate that brought us together and kept us together all these years. The final chapter of the book, written by their eldest grandson, described the end of their story with simple eloquence. My grandparents showed us all what it meant to truly love another person, to commit fully to a shared life, to weather every storm together and emerge stronger. They were not perfect people, but they were perfect for each other. And in a world that often seems chaotic and random, their story reminds us that sometimes things happen exactly as they are meant to, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that when you find where you truly belong, you know it in your soul. Isaac and Theresa belonged together. They knew it from the start, and they lived that truth every day of their lives. Their legacy is not just the land they settled or the family they raised, but the example they set of what love can be when two people choose each other every single day for a lifetime. They rest together now on the hill they loved, where they walked so many evenings hand in hand, talking and dreaming and simply being together. They are home. They are where they belong. And their love story lives on, inspiring everyone who hears it to believe in the possibility of finding that one person who makes everything make sense, who turns a lonely moment at a trading post into the beginning of a lifetime of belonging. And so the story ends as all the best love stories do, with two hearts joined, two lives perfectly intertwined, and a love that transcended time and circumstance to become something eternal. Isaac and Theresa had found what everyone searches for, a love that made them better people, a partnership that multiplied their joys and divided their sorrows, and the deep, abiding knowledge that they were exactly where they were meant to be together, always together, from that first moment at the trading post until they drew their last breaths and beyond, into whatever waits after this life ends. They had found home in each other, and that was everything.